Hope has turned to heartbreak in Western Australia after 45 stranded pilot whales were euthanised. Volunteers managed to get them back into the water at Cheynes Beach yesterday before they then re-stranded themselves. Joining us live now is wildlife scientist Dr Vanessa Pirotta. Vanessa, thank you for your time. Look, we can all understand that must have been an absolutely heart-wrenching decision for authorities to make over there in WA on the beach near Albany. Was there really no other realistic option on the table except to euthanise those whales?
Good afternoon. The team had absolutely done everything that they could have done. And so it's with that next step of decision making was undertook. And I will say, as one of the onlookers from around Australia and many around the world, that really was key here. There was nothing we can do, but we were really relying on people in the field to undertake that triage system. Once they've worked with the animals that still remained alive, were they the ones that were potential candidates to have that optimistic option of taking them out to the sea? And unfortunately, fortunately, the crew were able to get a number of them in the water together at one time. And so it was keeping with that pod mentality or that group mentality where they were all there together. Now, that unfortunately saw the animals in the water, which was a good thing, but they turned around and they re-stranded. So then the next option was then undertaken by authorities and veterinarians. This is never taken lightly, but the next most I would say more humane way would be that of euthanasia, to put these animals out of their suffering as a result of they're more than likely going to re-strand again. And often these are the types of things we see when we have a stranding event just like this.
And Vanessa, will the cause of that stranding event remain a mystery? I read that authorities are going to be taking samples from the whales for examination. Could those samples, do you think, shed some light on what went wrong here? What will they be looking for?
Potentially. So every single stranding around the world, regardless of species, is going to be different. And these animals might have come ashore due to different prior reasons that was different to, say, the Tasmanian strandings last year. So there's so many things to consider. But yes, you're right. If there's anything here, it's a silver lining, and that is two things in this case. One is the biological samples that we can acquire from these animals that are relatively an offshore species and very inaccessible for researchers. So this is really interesting. Scientists are taking blood samples, blubber, teeth, looking at inside their stomachs potentially. Not all of them, or maybe it might be all of them. And then the other section, or the other silver lining of this, is the drone observation pre-stranding. So this does provide some key insights as to what might be going on with these animals and what might be taking place prior to such events. So it's a very big undertaking, and often the answers that we seek may never be answered. And unfortunately, we might remain in the same position as we are right now, not knowing why they've done it. But certain components might provide a better understanding as to what kind of state health-wise these animals were in.
Vanessa, before following this story this week, I hadn't realised that these whales are so tight that they follow their leaders of the pod, even if it does lead them to these sort of devastating outcomes. Do we ever see whales drift off from their pods, or once they're born, is that connection to the pod so critical for their survival as they do make their journey through various oceans?
I think you echo the words of many people around Australia and the world. The fact that they heard the mums, there was a lot of different age classes in this pod, but mum and calves following their mums, and they're mammals like you and I. And so the little ones will likely follow their mums for a period of time. And in some marine mammals, like killer whales, for example, which are also a dolphin like the pilot whale, these animals do have social bonds that are very connected and really nice group mentality. Now, it is advantageous for certain sexes to leave a pod as to increase genetic diversity, such as the males leading so that there's not inbreeding in certain populations, or this may occur. But generally, some marine mammals, and pilot whales are a great example of that, are known to stay with each other for a long period of their lives. If not, in some cases, there might be some that will stay with their mums, for example, or their whole family pod forever. There are obviously will be individuals that do go off to other pods as well. So there can be, it's a wonderful world, the marine mammal world. And in this case, the pilot whale is a great example of how social bonds are key here. We do have individuals potentially following the leader. If there was a sick individual in this pod, which we don't know, but perhaps this is why we've seen the grouping like we've seen, or maybe safety in numbers. Perhaps they were avoiding something, or there was a sound source, or maybe there were killer whales in the area, or maybe their navigational abilities were disrupted by something. We're just not 100% sure as to what this is, and we may never find out.
Vanessa, we were just looking at some pictures of all those volunteers who rushed to the beach to try and help in this scenario. We've heard reports of people being in tears on the beach, just, so heart-wrenching in terms of the outcome here after so much hard work. I see at least one volunteer was injured trying to help a whale back into the water. Physically, this is a very challenging task, isn't it? These are very heavy animals we're talking about.
Well, they're at least the length of your car, generally speaking, and they can get up to 800 to possibly 1,000 kilograms. So they're not light. And yes, Peter Hartley was the incident control coordinator down there, and he has done an exceptional job at leading such a wonderful crew. Now, this consisted of veterinarians, experts, rangers, volunteers, and the local community. And this is another, I would say, the third silver lining of these types of incidents, is because you have that community helping each other out. There were people in their wetsuits in the water for hours, and it would have been cold, tiring, emotional. These animals would have been communicating to each other with sounds, and it's heartbreaking. And the fact that the animals re-stranded would have just been such a big blow for so many of those people on the water there. And so we really all right now that people have worked out what's happened with the entire situation, we need to really take our hats off to those people who've done the hard yards over those last few days. They really have, and they will be exhausted.
Yeah, and they tried their best, no doubt about that, despite the outcome. Dr. Vanessa Pirotta, I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.